Shane Van Gisbergen locks himself into the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs today. Plus, Carson Hocevar and Ricky Stenhouse add another chapter to their beef as we look at all the action from today's NASCAR inaugural Mexico City race. Welcome back to the Breaking Bob channel. Hope y'all are doing well on this Sunday night, or really wherever you're watching at this time in the world. I'm sure this might be a little bit more of an international video than usual for a multitude of reasons we'll get into. But of course, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I'm always talking NASCAR and racing on a daily basis here at Breaking Bob. We've got a lot to get into as NASCAR went south of the border in Mexico City at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez for the first time in the Cup Series history. Points-paying race in Mexico. Yesterday, it was Daniel Suarez, the big story, as he took the checkered flag in the Xfinity Series, having a great feel-good moment in his home country. Today, it was his Trackhouse teammate Shane Van Gisbergen stealing the show as the 88, that safety culture purple ride, looking great for Trackhouse, took the checkered flag for SVG's second career win, first since becoming a full-time driver in the Cup Series this year with Trackhouse and the 88. I want to call it the 91 always. It's the 88. It is the 88 for Shane Van Gisbergen. And dominant stage 3, really, once the caution came out on lap 65, it was SVG's race to lose, and he dominated. He even said he was coasting toward the end, or coasting toward the beginning of that run, and then really put the foot down. He told his team, stop telling me to slow down. I've got this. And got this. He did for the largest margin of victory since 2005. And really just goes to show that he was just locked in at the final part of the stage. And he even said before the race, I got some tips from my friend and other Red Bull athlete Max Verstappen, who has raced at this track a time or two, I guess you could say. Pretty good guy to get some tips from, even for someone with SVG's pedigree, a good guy to lean on in Max Verstappen, and that it showed for sure. Leading 60 laps, and of course that margin of victory, you would think it was pretty easy today, but it was far from it. From the weekend start to the finish there for SVG. It started with travel issues. He was a part of that NASCAR travel entourage that had issues with the plane taking off in Charlotte. They had an engine blow right before takeoff there. It was a scary scene. Trackhouse's engineers didn't fully get to NASCAR's camp set up in Mexico City, their HQ set up down there, until Saturday morning. And so they were behind the 8 ball. But regardless of that, then you add in SVG on the pole for today. That's exciting. But it broke today right before the race. He was feeling under the weather. It seems like his health deteriorated more and more as the day went on. And then his post-race interview said he was, quote, leaking out of both ends. So yeah, that doesn't sound good. We almost had a Tony Stewart there, it sounded like. And then once the race is actually going in stage 3, once that caution came out at lap 65 that almost handed him the race far as strategy goes, he had this issue where he thought he might have had a tire going down that would make him pit just like Ty Gibbs, who was his counterpart for most of the day. We'll talk about that. Instead, it was SVG just having some tire pressure issues. He misread it, I guess, and was able to make that car just dominate through the final run there to make it his second career NASCAR Cup Series win. And of course, this is what Trackhouse has really envisioned for him this season. I think there's 6 road courses on the schedule. This is part of 4 of the next 9 weeks, a road course on the summer schedule for NASCAR. And everyone kind of looked to SVG. Okay, you've started to do better the last few weeks on ovals, it seems like, but this is the bread and butter. This is where you're going to lock yourself into the playoffs if it's going to happen. And what a dominant way to do it today. Not only is it part of how Trackhouse planned for 2025, but then it locks that 88 into the owner's playoff points, which is the top 16. Massive, massive more money going to that team when the payouts come at the end of the year, which is, of course, the almighty dollar is what makes the world go round. Isn't that right? And then on the other end there for 2026, of course, everyone wants to play this game of silly season there. And of course, everyone does the math. Trackhouse has 4 drivers under contract for 3 seats apparently next year. One way to earn job security is by getting into victory lane. And for SVG, of course, these road courses are what he was brought in for. And the way that he dominated today with the drivers being at the track for the first time really in the Cup Series, this was his real competition leg up that you saw in Chicago back in 2023 when all those drivers were on a street course for the first time. It's similar to that fact today with SVG, even though he's never run it either. It's still just the fact that he's learning on the same curve with all these drivers, and you could really see it in the S's in qualifying. He just was naturally more comfortable, it felt like. So for SVG, massive into his resume as he gets to campaign for that seat again in 2026. I think that Trackhouse will keep it status quo personally. I think they'll keep Connor Zilic in the Xfinity Series one more year, and they'll let Daniel Suarez and SVG get another year of the Cup Series under their belt in that Trackhouse ride just to see how they want to pan it out. I think they'll let the results speak for themselves instead of making a decision. Look at Daniel Suarez and his image this weekend at Mexico, and then he wins the Xfinity race yesterday. Had decent speed today, was running top 10 most of the day. Trackhouse cars definitely have something at this track. I think that Trackhouse will keep their driver lineup the same, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to congratulate SVG once again on a job well done in stage 3. I did mention his counterpart, Ty Gibbs, who was the car to beat otherwise today. And really, we got robbed of that final battle in stage 3 because I mentioned that caution on lap 65 that really changed everything. SVG pitted on lap 63 for tires. Ty Gibbs stayed out, ran the cycle a little bit longer there, and right when he was about to come to pit road, they stayed him out one more lap, and of course, that's when the caution came out. Carson Hocevar spun, stalled out, and naturally, of course, Carson Hocevar brings out the caution. We'll get into his interesting day here in a little bit, but really ruined the day for Ty Gibbs, who then was put back into 11th on the restart, was stuck behind Ross Chastain of all people. Good luck passing Ross Chastain, especially on a road course with the speed that Trackhouse had today. It wasn't that he was able to outpace Ty Gibbs, but he was able to make that car wide enough just to keep up and keep that dirty air on the 54. And then it seemed like Gibbs his car just stalled out through the next part of that run. He ended up finishing 11th on the day. It's frustrating for Ty Gibbs, who's going for that first career win. It's really at this point, win yourself into the playoffs. And instead of him being the car that's going to the playoffs, you're looking at your counterpart, SVG, a guy who was 33rd in points coming into the week, is now the guy who's locked in the playoffs, where Ty Gibbs in a competitive ride in that JGR 54. Once again, last week at Michigan, third place, was frustrated on the radio. I think this is another week that 54 camp feels like they could have been a moment to lock themselves into the playoffs for 2025. And it seemed like the midfield battles almost were war today once stage 3 got going. The gloves were off. Multiple battles, of course. Chase Briscoe versus Ross Chastain. Briscoe on the radio saying, F that guy, as Chastain gave him the bumper once Briscoe got around him. Some racing there. You got Joey Logano versus Austin Dillon. Richmond 2.0. For those of you that wanted NASCAR to go to Richmond this weekend, well, yeah, you kind of manifested Austin Dillon versus Joey Logano a little bit there. Maybe some payback as the 22 spun him after those two, it seemed like, rub doubles a couple of times. But the main one, of course, everyone wants to talk about is Carson Hocevar versus Ricky Stenhouse Jr. These two, seems like they just can't stay away from one another after their incident a couple weeks ago at Nashville really started this feud through the media. Ricky said, if he doesn't apologize, I'll go talk to him. And Carson apparently talked to him. Ricky said, well, I can see where he came from there at that Nashville. And said, well, today seems like there's not as much peace as we thought in this rivalry that's reignited, I guess, this beef. Because Ricky Stenhouse, of course, got punted a couple of times by the 77, who just seems like was a little out of control all day today. One way or another, it looked like he was either in the grass coming out of one, he was spinning or sending it into the stadium area. It just seemed like this was just not a banner day for Carson Hocevar. And Ricky Stenhouse was clearly frustrated. It seems like he was on the wrong side of a lot of those incidents. For one way or another, these guys are just glued to each other the last few weeks, it seems like. And then the frustrations bubble over. Stenhouse said on the radio, I'll see him at Pocono, but no, he made it even quicker than that. He went up to Hocevar's window at the end of the race, got out before Hocevar could even get out of the car, and gave him some choice words, it looked like. I'm sure we'll hear some of the transcript of that here once everything kind of breaks from Mexico City, but going to be interesting to see what happens of this moving forward. Carson Hocevar versus Ricky Stenhouse. Not done by any means. Let me know what your thoughts are on that rivalry down below. And the main incident was early on in stage 1. Kyle Busch just sent it into turn 1 a little too hard. It was still when that rain was very heavy on in the race today, and he took out Kyle Larson, he took out AJ Allmendinger, Justin Haley, multiple cars involved. Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson were sent to the garage. Larson was able to come back and somehow got the fastest lap, I believe, on the race. But Kyle Busch, on a day where he's coming in on the playoff bubble right there with Ryan Preece, not what he needs at all. And that was a major incident. Took out some good cars. AJ Allmendinger, though, was able to still finish 13th, even with that back end tore up. Really showed that Kaulig brought some speed today, as well as his counterpart, Ty Dillon. Although he finished in the 30s, was running top 10 for a lot of this day. Really, really want to congratulate Kaulig on it seems like they brought something to the track that a lot of teams may not have when they unloaded. Kaulig was almost, it seems like a what-if day for them. Some other results in the top 10, we've got the Hendrick duo, Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman in 3rd and 4th. really the guys that have kind of been the other guys at Hendrick Motorsports finally getting a turn in the top five for once. And then Michael McDowell, of course, a road course ringer. He did win at Indianapolis a couple years ago at the Indy Road Course. Fifth place for Michael McDowell, Inspire Motorsports, as he is in his new digs this year. That's what they brought him on for, is the veteran leadership and and road course races like this. Michael McDowell really shows his prowess, and John Hunter Nemechek as well. It seems like Legacy Motor Club has really gotten a boost this year on those mile and a halves, but John Hunter Nemechek, a sixth place finish today as he beats out Chase Briscoe, the JGR sister team of the Toyota side, with a seventh place finish. Cole Custer and the Haas factory team in eighth. What a run for them, it seems like today, even though they were kind of holding up people toward the end of the day. William Byron ninth. Chris Buescher in 10th, and Buescher and Austin Cindric ran some wild strategy in stage one where they stayed out on slick tires when it was pouring down rain. The fact that Chris Buescher was able to make a top 10 out of this today shows that I'm not a crew chief, and I don't know what strategy is, because I would have thought that strategy would have absolutely buried them for the day. But no, it was an interesting call for sure, though. But overall, loved the racing today at Mexico. I thought this track was perfect for NASCAR, and I would love to see them come back for the future. I know it's kind of polarizing on social media, but if you really look at the on-track atmosphere, you look at the drivers getting mobbed for autographs, Michael McDowell, Todd Gilliland, you could tell that I think the people that really embraced it really were all in and had a great time. And there's always going to be some people that, oh, well, they should be at Richmond. They don't need to be in Mexico. But this is how NASCAR grows their sport and their image culturally. And, they don't have to race in Europe 10 times. They don't need to race in Mexico 3 or 4 times. But once every year, or every couple of years, this track produced great racing. And everyone wants, at the end of the day, great racing in the NASCAR world. And I think we got that today. And you could even tell some of the drivers, I think, we're excited for the most part, even if a couple of them got sick drinking some of the tap water. Looking at you, Noah Gragson, maybe even you, SVG. But you hear Kyle Larson talking about how instead of everyone being solo at the motorhomes, they had to carpool together. They were at the hotels together. It forced them to get along and get to know one another and kind of have that bonding experience, almost like a field trip together. So I thought that this was a great breath of fresh air. I think they could plan out logistics maybe a little bit better, but moving forward, I think this track belongs on the NASCAR Cup Series. Maybe not every single year, but it definitely should be on the calendar somewhat annually, very frequently for sure. It'd be, I think, a disservice to the NASCAR Cup Series if we don't go back there. But let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, SVG, career win number 2. We've got more beef with Carson, Hocevar, and Ricky Stenhouse, and all the other action from Mexico City today. If you've made it this far, I do appreciate you for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to Breaking Bob for more NASCAR content, because it does help me out a ton. And I do appreciate you again for making it this far. I'll see you soon, as whatever NASCAR news comes out of Mexico City and beyond for this week, I'll be on top of it as always. Thanks for watching. See you next time.